The conference room hummed with the sterile energy of controlled ambition, every surface polished to a high gloss, every attendee arranged in perfect symmetry. At the center of it all stood Alex, a paragon of preparation. His presentation was a masterpiece of meticulous design, each slide a testament to countless hours of obsessive refinement. The fonts were perfectly matched, the data visualizations crisp and unambiguous, his own posture an unwavering line of professional composure. He spoke with a calibrated precision, his voice a steady, reassuring instrument that left no room for hesitation or error. He navigated the complex material with an effortless grace that belied the sleepless nights and abandoned drafts that had led to this moment. Every gesture was purposeful, every pause strategically placed for maximum impact. He was, by every observable metric, flawless. A ripple of polite applause filled the room as he concluded, the sound washing over him like a lukewarm wave. He offered a tight, practiced smile, his eyes scanning the faces before him. They were impressed. He could see it in their nods and the scribbled notes, but their admiration felt distant, a transaction completed rather than a connection forged. He saw respect in their eyes, but not warmth. The hollowness that bloomed in his chest was a familiar companion, a stark contrast to the pristine perfection he had just displayed. He was a brilliant specimen under glass, admired from a safe distance, but never truly touched. As the room began to clear, the echo of that hollow feeling grew louder. He thought of the strained silence on the phone with his sister last week, another conversation cut short by his unsolicited, perfectly logical critique of her life choices. He remembered the tired resignation in his partner's eyes when he'd spent an entire evening reorganizing the bookshelf by color and genre, instead of simply watching a movie. His pursuit of the impeccable had built a beautiful, solitary fortress around him. Every polished achievement was another brick in the wall, separating him from the messy, unpredictable, and wonderfully imperfect world of human intimacy. The applause had faded, leaving only the quiet, immense pressure of being the man who never made a mistake and the profound loneliness of being flawless. The clatter of ceramic and the sudden, searing heat against his chest shattered Alex's carefully maintained composure. One moment, he was holding his mug, the dark liquid within a symbol of the casual, post-presentation camaraderie he always observed from a distance. The next, a clumsy bump against the conference table sent a wave of coffee cascading down the front of his crisp, white shirt, leaving a sprawling, brown stain that bloomed like a Rorschach test of his own ineptitude. A cold wave of panic washed over him, his heart hammering against his ribs. This was the antithesis of control, a public, messy failure that mocked the flawless performance of just an hour before. His first instinct was to freeze, to wish for the floor to swallow him whole, to mentally catalogue the fastest route to the restroom and a futile attempt at damage control. But then, something unexpected happened. A sound escaped his lips, not a gasp of horror, but a short, genuine laugh. It was a rusty, unpracticed sound, born from the sheer absurdity of the situation. He, the man of impeccable timing and precision, had been undone by a simple cup of coffee. He looked down at the ruin of his shirt, shook his head, and let the laughter grow, a real, unscripted reaction that felt alien and liberating. The tense silence of his colleagues broke, not with pity, but with a chorus of shared amusement. Sarah from marketing chuckled, her own hand flying to her mouth in a gesture of sympathetic recognition. Ben, the senior analyst, clapped him lightly on the shoulder, his eyes crinkling with mirth. The spilled coffee, instead of being a mark of shame, became an instant icebreaker. The conversation, which had been stilted and professional moments before, loosened its tie. They shared stories of their own most embarrassing office mishaps. The time Ben had sent a company-wide email meant for his wife. The day Sarah had presented with her dress tucked into her tights. For the first time, Alex was not the untouchable expert, but a fellow traveler in the land of human error. The connection he had craved during his presentation was suddenly, effortlessly there, forged in the warmth of shared imperfection. Later, at his desk, the coffee stain a dull, drying map on his chest, the encounter lingered in his mind. The shift in dynamics had been too profound to ignore. Driven by a newfound curiosity, he began to research, his fingers flying across the keyboard. He discovered the Pratfall Effect, the psychological principle articulated by Elliot Aronson. He read about the experiment where audiences consistently rated competent individuals as more likable after they committed a minor, clumsy blunder, like spilling a cup of coffee. The data was clear. Perfection could be intimidating, even alienating, but a small, relatable flaw made a person seem human, approachable, and trustworthy. The spark of understanding ignited into a steady flame. Vulnerability was not a weakness to be concealed. It was a bridge, a silent, powerful language that could span the emotional gaps his perfection had always widened. The stain on his shirt was no longer a blemish, but the first, honest brushstroke on a new canvas. The stage lights felt different this time, warmer somehow, as if they were illuminating a person rather than a performance. Alex stood before a new audience, the memory of the coffee stain and the subsequent revelation, a quiet hum in the back of his mind. His slides were still impeccably prepared, his arguments sound, but a new intention had taken root within him. He was no longer here to present a flawless facade. He was here to connect. About halfway through, as he approached a particularly dense technical concept, he saw his opportunity. The word was heuristic, a term he had pronounced perfectly 1,000 times in rehearsal. But this time, he deliberately let his tongue slip, shaping it into a clumsy, drawn-out heuristic. The mispronunciation hung in the air for a deliberate beat, a deliberate crack in the veneer. He paused, letting the odd sound settle over the room. Then he looked out at the audience, a wry, self-deprecating smile touching his lips. He shook his head slightly, as if sharing a private joke with himself, and then with all of them. He gestured lightly toward the screen, his posture relaxed and open, inviting them into the moment of his own manufactured clumsiness. The reaction was not the polite, distant silence of his previous presentations. It started with a few scattered chuckles, then swelled into a wave of warm, genuine laughter. He saw heads nodding in recognition, not of the term, but of the shared experience of tripping over one's own words. The energy in the room shifted palpably. Where there had been passive observation, there was now engaged camaraderie. As he continued, correcting the term with a playful shrug, he felt a current of connection flowing back to him. Eyes that had previously been glazed with information overload were now bright with interest. They were leaning in, not just to hear the content, but to hear him. The feeling was profoundly different from the hollow applause of the past. This was not admiration from a distance. It was a shared space, built on the unspoken agreement that everyone was human and everyone made mistakes. He was no longer a remote expert on a pedestal, but a guide who had just shown them he sometimes stumbled on the same path they were walking. Later, as he packed his laptop, the resonance of the experience settled deep within him. He contrasted the cold isolation of his previous perfect presentation with the warm, lively engagement of this one. He had internalized the lesson from the spilled coffee and the pratfall effect, transforming theory into practice. Embracing a small, intentional blunder had not diminished his credibility, it had amplified his humanity. He understood now that authenticity was the true currency of connection. Perfection built walls, but the willing, shared acknowledgement of imperfection built bridges. The pursuit of flawlessness had left him lonely, but the courage to be authentically, occasionally clumsy, had made